Hey guys, Curtis here. This is the thank you for 200 subscriber video. As I mentioned in my first 100 subscriber video, that each time that I hit that 100 mark, I'm going to do a top 10 list of just something probably not Tekken related, or just talk about a topic that I want to talk about. And this week, as my kind of thank yous for subscribing to my channel, I wanted to talk about my top 10 favorite board game or card games that are 1 versus 1. So these are non-competitive, non-cooperative games. These are competitive games. Some of these I have played in tournament settings, or I just sit and play with my wife or other friends that come by, and they're just a lot of fun to play. So with that, let's get started. So my first one coming at number 10 is Pixel Tactics. Really easy, just kind of 1 versus 1 combat style game. Each of you are given a deck of 25 cards, and you're playing kind of the best of 3, in which then you have to, in your starting hand of I think it's 3 or 4 cards, you have to pick one as your commander, and then everything else in that 25 card deck is kind of your troops that you play. And it's played in a kind of a 3x3 grid, in which there's a front line, a middle line, and the back line. And each card has a different kind of special ability. So if we kind of look at the sample card, you either can play in the front, which is the red, in the middle, which is green, in the back, which is blue, or you can play it as a special ability, which is this purple ability, and it's not really focusing up very well on the card. But that's what the card looks like normally. Or you can play it on the commander side, in which none of that means anything, and just the top text at the very top is kind of what matters. And these are kind of my favorite 3 when I play the game. Most of them are related to just more control, giving me more actions. This is actually my favorite, being able to play a lot of orders on a single turn, since some of the order abilities are just ridiculously strong, so you can just straight up nuke your opponent's field and damage their main guy and just kind of win. So coming at number 10, Pixel Tactics 1 versus 1. Each person is basically has the exact same deck, and so it really comes down to who do I pick as my commander and how do I place my troops, and so on and so forth. Next, coming at number 9 is GOSU 2, or GOSU 2 Tactics, which is, again, this time you have a shared deck of a bunch of cards, which just kind of sits in the middle. And this is the entire game right here, all the deck cards, in which then there's 5 different kind of goblin classes that you get to play. My favorite is kind of the black faction, but most of the time you're going to be playing either 2 or 3 different colors, and those colors may change as the game plays. And it's a first to whoever wins 3 rounds is the winner. And there's a really nasty comeback mechanic. So if you are just trying to steamroll your opponent, most of the time that's not going to work at all, because the comeback mechanic is going to come back and just kind of bite you in the ass. My wife's favorite color is this white kind of class, which is centered around just drawing cards. My favorite is actually the black goblins, not only because a lot of times they have destruction or control capabilities, but they have a unique ability in which they can kind of transform themselves into any card in the graveyard. And so if you need to make a mid-game switch or late-game switch, black is really easy to just swap out into a different color or just splash a color here and there. Really powerful. It's really fun. The game says to play up to 4 cards. Don't even play it with 3 players. It's a 2-player game. But we've had a lot of chaotic fun and a lot of kind of competitive moments in that game, which makes GOSU 2 coming in at number 9. Next, we have our big box, which is Codex by David Sirlin. And we may be seeing another David Sirlin game on this list. But this is a mixture of deck building / constructed decks and so on and so forth. The game is actually played using different binders. I have the full big printing, so I have these fancy binders. And this is essentially your quote-unquote constructed deck. You have to pick 3 different heroes And each of those heroes then have different minions that they're able to bring to the battlefield, different array of spells, different abilities, and so on and so forth. And what this game really has done, it has replaced Magic the Gathering for me completely. After I purchased this, I had zero interest in ever playing Magic the Gathering again. A lot of the abilities are very similar to Magic the Gathering, and while that may evolve, this is just such a solid, tight kind of experience. My wife and I have played this a bunch of times. Her favorite color is purple. There's also white, blue, green, red, and black. And you don't have to just stick to one color. You can actually customize your characters. And the 3 heroes that I like playing is first General Amaro. He's kind of my blue hero. He has some really strong building destruction capabilities, and he's a really solid kind of early pick. Because his ability can make him a 3/3, which goes through just about every single defender in the game. Next is my little ninja power. She has a lot of fast things, a lot of flyers, and just kind of a lot of annoyance kind of things. But ultimately, she's a very quick hero to get to level 6, and which then she draws an additional 2 cards each upkeep, which then obviously more cards, you have more chances to do things. And then finally another white hero. He's kind of, again, my kind of go-to just shenanigan guy. Again, he has some building destruction, but a lot of times he's just a really solid hero of just doing tick damage to a lot of my enemy creatures. And so I run these 3 heroes when I want to try to play competitively. If you're just starting out, I would recommend playing white, but you can kind of do whatever you want to do. But Codex, really solid. If you don't have to get the big collector's edition, you can just buy, I think, the heroes as packs if you're interested in that at all. But so that's Codex coming in at number 8. At number 7, we have another kind of constructed deck builder, which is Android Netrunner from Fantasy Flight Games. I only had the base game because my wife, she will tolerate to play this with me, but other than that, we've had a few very tense situations, which the game does very well because it's asymmetric. One of you is a corporation, and the other one is the Netrunner, who's basically the hacker in the game. I don't have a single favorite that we take out because it's just the base game, so we cycle out very commonly. A lot of times either we'll play as the newscaster, as the corporation, or kind of a throwback to Blade Runner. There's a clone clan that you can do, which is red, and all the runners seem pretty solid. So I don't really have a general favorite there. We just like to play it every once in a while. But it's really cool because the corporation has complete information, and the runner has to make probable guesses of what face-down cards are, and so there's a lot of double play in which the corporation can be looking like they're scoring an agenda, which is kind of the victory points to mark who wins, but they're really setting up a big trap, and because of those traps, my wife doesn't really like me playing that game. But it's really cool because one player plays corporation, the other one's a runner, and then you swap, and it's each game is like to 7 points. Whoever gets the 7 points first, then you're done, and then you swap. And so then it's the cumulative points from game 1 and game 2. And so instead of just, are you really good at just playing this one style, you really have to learn 2 styles. And I really like that kind of constructed thinking of building the decks before the game and then adapting to, okay, behaviorally my opponent has done this in the past, so how do I do this? Or he's set this up, how do I respond to this? And that kind of thinking I really like, especially in card games and board games, which kind of brings why Netrunner is number 7 on my favorite 1 versus 1 list. Next is a little bit lighter game, a lot more probabilistic, in which number 6 is Summoner Wars by Plaid Hat Games. This, you don't have to do any constructed decks at all or anything else. All the factions are pre-made. You just pick a faction, you set it up like the game tells you to, and then you just go. All the combat is done via dice, but every single faction has very unique abilities. My favorite faction that I have here is the Swamp Orcs, in which their kind of special ability is to, when things die, they start slowly building more and more vine walls, which then slow down your opponent, and it just slows your opponent down really big. So my guys may not be the strongest in the game, but they're also not the weakest. But the main point is just to slow down my opponent. There's, I think, a total of, there's at least 12 factions, but I think Plaid Hat said that they are officially done releasing content. So what's out there is out there, and there is a variation where you can mix and match different allies together, but we don't do that. We just have the master set, and that's really enough in game for us, in which if you want to play someone range, you can do range. If you want to do melee, you can do melee. If you want to do more control stuff, it's in there. Because it's so well balanced, like there's no faction that just completely dominates, is kind of main reason why Summoner Wars comes in at number 6 on this list. It's coming in at number 5, so this is again a 1 versus 1 game, and it is Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small. This is a worker placement game in which it's basically the husband versus the wife, and who can build the best farm. I know this may sound like a very boring theme, and worker placement games aren't for everyone, but my wife and I really love worker placement games because there's a lot of deep thinking, and something that you did on turn 1 can affect your turn 6, and so there's a lot of analysis that kind of needs to happen, and there's a lot of moments where you can just block your opponent. So it may not be the best option for you right then and there, but it's only a good option because it limits what your opponent can do. And so not only are you getting the different animals, being the sheep, pigs, cows, and horses, that's kind of the score tracker, but you're also getting wood and stone, and you can even steal who goes first at each round. But my wife and I really love playing this game. It's a pretty casually 1 versus 1 competitive game, but there's a lot of deep thinking, which sometimes that's what we want to do. We just want to sit, think through a problem, figure out the puzzle, and then be done with the game. This game rarely ends in an argument, which is why this game comes in at number 5, which is Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small. We also do have the first expansion, but there's a second one I just haven't found it. So coming in at number 4 is Battle Line. This isn't the kind of first edition. It also could be Shokten Toten, which was the first edition, and then they re-released it recently. We have Battle Line, which is kind of an area control shared deck card game, in which you have cards that range from 1 to 10, and then there's different colors that you have to make formations, in which it follows kind of poker, in which you have a 3 of a kind, you have a straight with 3 cards, you have a flush with 3 cards, and whoever controls that best position wins that flag or in that stone if you're playing the other version. And if you get 3 of those locations in a row, you immediately win, or if you have majority of it all split. And so there's some random factors, but there's a lot of probabilistic information in front of you, as well as what your opponent has already played and where they've played it. And so that's why I really like it. There's not a lot of discussion that occurs, but sometimes when we just want to sit down and kind of do a battle, this is a really big brain burner, and it's a super solid game. There's also tactics cards that is kind of used in the quote-unquote expert version, but you should always play them because there's no reason to, and that really changes the game dynamics as soon as you introduce that. But Battle Line, super simple, super cheap to get, and just very easy to travel with and play kind of wherever. And that kind of puts Battle Line at number 4. Next, coming in at number 3 is another David Sirlin game, in which it's Yomi. So this is the 2nd edition box. I had this 1st edition, but I gave it to one of my very close friends, Victor. And I also gave him the mats, which came with the 1st edition, because I didn't really need it. All I needed was the 2nd edition, which has all the updated characters. It has the variation to play against the dragon, everything else. But this is basically rock, paper, scissors on steroids, I guess is the best thing. But it uses a lot of fighting game conventions of attacks, throws, blocks, dodges, and attacks beat throws, throws beat blocks, and dodges, and blocks and dodges beat attacks. And so there's a lot of double thinking of going on. But it's not just that 1/3% of those three options, because every character, one character might have more attacks, one might have more throws, one might have more blocks. And there's a lot of good interaction of just, if you want to be a brain burner, you can make it a brain burner. Or what Victor and I do, we sit down and we just catch up on old times, or like catch up on what's going on in our lives, and we sit and we just keep playing, because it can be a very casual game and very wonky things happen from time to time. There is a competitive scene for it. I've never played competitively. Sometimes I play on Steam, because I also have that version. So I bought Steam version 1 and version 2. But my top 3 characters that I have, in no real particular order, is I first had General Amaro, so the same guy that I really like in Codex. He's really good. He has 0 combo skills, but he hits like a truck. And he also has a special ability where he can beat any attack and then hit you really hard with it. Next we have DeGray. Basically his attacks become stronger based on how many cards are in your opponent's hands versus your hand. It's a really interesting mechanic. You can be played very aggressively and just unrelenting pressure. And then finally, if I want to just have fun, I play Loom. He's very poker centered, but you have to really track all of your kind of discard piles to utilize them effectively. So he's actually a very big brain burner kind of in the game comparatively. And it's just a lot of fun to play, super simple. There's some variations where it can be like 2 versus 2, 2 versus 1. I've never done that, just play straight up 1 versus 1. And I do not play with the EX cards. I have them because they came with the set, but I've never used them because they're very wonky and I don't really want that experience. I like very balanced kind of type play. So coming at number 3 is Yomi. Coming at number 2, this is a game that I still play in tournaments from time to time, which is a miniature game called Warmachine. And so here's just the newest kind of battle group that you have, and I play as Crix mainly. I have some Circle and some Mercenaries, but Crix is kind of where I go. They're very hard-hitting, kind of weak, fast units. And they have probably one of the best spell sets in the entire game. It's very similar to chess, in which you have like one king who's a warcaster, in which they have a lot of special powers, in which then they bring giant robots, or in my case I bring also undead. Some people bring basically elves or mechs and so on and so forth. And it's just a lot of fun. The only difference between chess, instead of I move 1, then your opponent moves 1, you move your entire army at once, and then it's the next player's turn, they move their entire army, and then you take turns that way. And you can either win by control points based on the scenario, or by killing your warcaster. I'm not the greatest painter, and recently I haven't had a lot of time, but this is Gatsby1. He's been my favorite caster for Crix for a long time, just because he has really good spell sets, spells that he's able to cast, and my favorite list I like to call Clouds and Friends, in which I'm throwing out 3 to 4. The most I can throw out is I think 7 a turn, in which they're just poisonous clouds all over the battlefield. So it just wipes out infantry armies really effectively, and then Gatsby1 has very good anti-armor moves, so if my opponent is bringing heavy jacks, just nuke their armor, rush in with Bane Warriors, usually with Weapon Masters, and just take them down. This is probably the most expensive game to get into, especially because this is just one faction out of the like 10 or so that are out there, if you're also including Hordes. So try it if you want, but try not to get too financially invested in it, because that could be hurting. but it's a super fun game to play. My play group, usually we just play fun games and we just want to see funny things go on. But as I said, we do have the competitive scene, and it is very much expanding, in my opinion, of what I observe. So coming at number 2, it's Warmachine or Hordes. And then finally, number 1, I played this in tournaments for multiple years until the game started to really just teeter off. In which that game is UFS, or the Universal Fighting System. And so UFS used fighting game properties, and then it branched out in Mega Man. They also came up with their own proprietary kind of games. But this was basically Magic the Gathering using fighting games. And you could buy these kind of personal packs, or battle packs, which is you can just play right out of the box. This is just straight out of the box for whenever I can convince my wife to play or somebody else to play. But this is a very complicated game. One of my very good friends, who I live with, Aaron, he was a very good tournament player in Magic the Gathering. He thinks UFS is too complicated. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like it. You have to know a lot of rules. You have to also know what your opponents can do and how to react, because there's different speed values that you have to measure, different attack damages, and also there's the high, mid, and low that we see in Tekken, in which really makes you think of how you construct your deck before you go in, and also what champion you use. I got out of it as Sabertooth Games, which was the first publisher. They sold it off to Fantasy Flight, or they went bankrupt, I can't remember. Fantasy Flight had it for a while, and then they sold it to Jasco Games. And Jasco Games kind of brought the Mega Man into the play. But I played primarily when Sabertooth Games had it, and I got to play against some of the game developers in tournaments, and I beat them. And we just had a lot of fun. And just real quickly, I'm not going to go over every single mechanic, but kind of my favorite characters. Yukio 2 from SNK, Samurai Shodown. This was like my main guy that I won most of my tournaments with. He's just super good, has an awesome card draw ability and awesome resources that he's able just to kind of chain all together. He was my really go-to person. Next we have Simon Mina, who's just shenanigans, in which you basically discard your opponent's entire deck. She was a mill-based character in which you just slowly remove your opponent's deck from the game and they can't do anything about it. Next is Dan. Dan's ability is your opponent doesn't have an ability. And so in my meta for a long time, people were playing characters that really relied on their decks working based on their abilities, so I would just bring Dan and say, none of us have an ability. And then most of my cards were just very well statted, and so it was much longer games, but that's how I won out. He also ran shenanigans where neither of us can draw cards. We had to discard cards all the time, and so like it slowed down the game, but because I had higher static cards, Dan would come up and win. And then this was a promo card. This is Saint Nick. This was my ultimate like Super Turtle trolley deck, in which he has one of the few alternative win conditions of you place Christmas counters on him, and at the beginning of every turn you remove one. And as soon as he doesn't have any left, you immediately win the game. So like Saint Nick counting down to Christmas. And I just thought this was funny that they adapted basically Santa Claus into this fighting game atmosphere. So you see Saint Nick versus Ryu, and all the other fighters, Akuma, even King, because there was a Tekken edition that came out, and it was just really funny. But I played UFS so much when I was an undergrad for about 2-3 years, like super solidly. I was very active on the forums, and we came up with some really ridiculous game-breaking stuff, which then eventually got banned, because that's how UFS decided to do things. Rather than come up with errata, which sometimes they did, it was like, it's just easier just to ban all the cards. And last time when I checked my Yukio deck, just about every single card that was in my deck is just banned, even in Legacy. A few people still play this game, but I'm completely out of it. Every once in a while when I can find something on Bargain Bin, I just pick it up just because I I love it so much. And every once in a while I can convince someone to play me, even with the most basic rules. I have a lot of problems with where the game went, even from a stats instance, but that's not the point of this list. UFS was just awesome, and if you really knew how to play the game, these matches could go 5-10 minutes. If you didn't know how to play, you're talking about 30-45 minutes for a single game. But they were just fast, high-end action, and as soon as you were done, we shuffled up and just played immediately again. There is like a side deck in competitive play, and it was used, but like tie-in players, we didn't even have to think about what to swap in, swap out. We just knew immediately. It was like shuffle up. All right, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And action can start on the first turn, which is actually my hugest complaint with games like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, in which, because of the mana restriction, games like follow a very specific pattern, and like we even measure things like, oh, by turn 3 this should happen, by turn 6 this should happen. UFS, you can immediately just start attacking your opponent or trying to shut them down or everything else from the start of the game. Or you can decide to play this much slower, more drawn out game. So it kind of mirrored to me a lot with what fighting games are, in which you can just go kind of balls to the wall immediately, or you can kind of delay, get a feeling off, and then as soon as you get your combo, you unleash it and take out the game. It's kind of the one-turn kill kind of mentality. But UFS, I really love it. If anyone comes up to me and asks to play this game, this is the game that, yes, we will play, we will go, and it doesn't, I didn't mention this, what I really love about it, some of my people in my old play group, they said, oh, Curtis, your deck is just too good, it's too broken, no one could win against this deck. In which then I said, okay, you take my deck that I've constructed, which you've said is overpowered, unbeatable. I will take your deck, in which I've been playing you, and you know, we've won a bunch of times. I'm going to play your deck, and I'm going to beat you out of 2 out of 3. And as soon as we did that, they're like, no, it'll never happen. And then I won 2 out of 3, 2-0, meaning I didn't lose a single game. And like, they're trying to scratch and think about it. It's just like, UFS isn't about just knowing your deck or having a good deck. It's knowing how to make sure that they don't come at you. And it's that same mentality that I look in fighting games, where it's not about trying to maximize winning. It's about just minimizing your own loss and everything else, and you're playing to not lose. And so I would play defensively because I knew what tricks my awesome deck had. I would make sure that those couldn't happen, and I would just slowly tick them away with whatever I had, and then I would win. So it was a very skill-based game, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, because you had to devote so much time outside of the game to really understand all the rules and really understand all the nuances of what to do. But at super high levels, this was really fun. And even at low levels, if we were just playing fun games and I would just play any of the tons of heroes, just play all the tons of heroes that we had. Like, yeah, there was champions that were better than others, ranging from the Street Fighter universe, the SNK universe, to the Namco universe, and even just kind of made up universes. But it was just fun, and it really didn't matter what I was playing. I would always play this game. Even these constructed decks, I will just go up and go. And so that was my list. I know this was a little bit longer, but I wanted to give a good kind of overview of why I really like the game, and it's something to look into. UFS is still being constructed, but really I wouldn't buy into it now. And it's just unfortunate. At a different time I'll go into it, but not right now. So I know this is a long video. Thanks for watching again. 200 subscribers at this rate is way beyond what I ever expected, so thank you very much. Normal content will resume as normal after this, but we'll see you guys at 300, and thanks for your support. We'll see you guys next time.